Welcome back to our continuing discussion of using Excel. In this video we're going to discuss nested if functions, VLOOKUP functions, and an interesting function called IFERROR on there. So we will continue using the employee worksheet or workbook. So if you don't have that handy and you want to work alongside the video, go ahead and pause this and we'll wait for you. Alright, in our last video we used some advanced functions to calculate the life insurance premium. That was a simple if function. To calculate the 401k contribution, we used an AND because there were two different conditions that had to be satisfied. And then we also calculated a salary increase, which was using an OR statement because we were looking at two conditions and one of them had to be true in order to receive a 4% salary increase. Otherwise you got a 2.5. Well, this time we're going to be using some extra things. We're going to be using a nested if statement. So this is simply when we're going to use one if function placed inside of another if function, and that tests a second condition with that. Okay, no rocket science here. So that's all it is. And then we're going to use the VLOOKUP function, and the VLOOKUP function uses a lookup value. So we're going to have something that we're looking up and then we want information about that value. And we'll use lookup tables to accomplish that. So we'll have something that we're looking up, we go over to the table, we find that value, and then we return information about it. The key thing with VLOOKUP is that it sounds confusing, but it really isn't as long as you remember what are we doing. We're simply using a book. We go to the back of the book because we can't remember what page number a certain topic is on. So we look up the word that we're looking for in the book, and then it returns a page number back to us. For example, I don't know, if we were looking at our Excel book and we couldn't remember how to remove a filter from a table. So I might look back in the back of my book and I'm going to look for table in removing a filter. And when I find that word in the list of terms, the next item over or the next column over has a page number. And what am I going to do? I'm going to look at that page number and I'm going to go back to the book and get the information that I want. So it's the same thing that we're doing in Excel when we're actually looking this up. We're looking for a value in a table, and then we're going to gather information and report back on what that is. And then the IFERROR is a nifty little function, because if we have an error in our cells, then it can be problematic and we get these obscure things that just don't mean anything to us, right? It might say a hashtag or a pound sign, whichever you're most comfortable with using, name or div. Those are kind of generic error messages, right? Those are the default errors. But it's more meaningful if I have something that when I have an error in there, that instead of giving me some obscure thing that I don't know what it means, if I have something that says maybe invalid code or check shipping rate or product does not exist, those are meaningful to me because that tells me what? It gives me an answer instead of some obscure thing and be like, what's wrong? Help me out here, guys, right? So those are the kind of the main aspects that we're going to use here. All right. So we're going to determine using our, what do we want to do? Using our current information, if you look at our employee data table here, if we scroll over to the right, you'll see that I have some cells over here that are some comparative things. So we're going to be using these cells in Y2, Y3, and Y4. Change that. As we look at this bonus pay grades. And that's, it's kind of nice because you can hide cells off to the side of your table and yeah, get away with it sometimes. Alright, so we're going to call in Q1, we're going to call this column bonus. And we're going to create a nested if here. Because what we want to do is if what? If they have a pay grade of 1, then they get a certain bonus. If they have a pay grade of 2, they get a certain bonus. If they have a pay grade of 3, they get a certain bonus. Okay? That's what we want to look at. So, here's how we're going to do this. So we're going to use our if statement. So insert your if statement, however you want to do that. We're going to find our if, and here's where we start. Okay. We want to say what? We're going to use a structured reference. So we're going to say if pay grade, whoops, square brackets there. If pay grade equals 1, the value that we want is, we need to, if we go over here and we look over here and remind ourselves, there's the bonus for pay grade 1. That is in cell Y2. Alright, so the value, if it's true, is Y2. But you remember, this is going to carry throughout the table, so it's very important that we create an absolute cell reference there. So change that to an absolute cell reference. Remember, the quick way to do that is your F4 key. And the value, if it's false, what do we want it to do? If it's false, we want it to go back and say, okay, is the pay grade level 2? So we do that. So here's where we're going to put our nested if. So now we're going to say if, open our parenthesis, and we're going to say pay grade, so structured reference again. If pay grade, let me fix that capitalization. If pay grade equals 2, then I want it to do the next thing, right? So I put a comma that tells me it's going to the next piece of the argument. So if it's true, I want it to return the value of the bonus of pay grade 2, which is cell Y3. Again, absolute value. But if it's false, because remember, we only have 1, 2, and 3 for our pay grades. So if it's not pay grade 1, look and see if it's pay grade 2. If it's not pay grade 2, we know it must be a pay grade 3, which that should be the set Y4 or $7,500, and again, absolute value that. Once we do these things, we say OK. Oh, I'm missing a parentheses. That is because at the end, let me open this back up. Sometimes I wonder what I do. Alright, so if pay grade equals 1, tell it to do Y2. If pay grade equals 2, I want it to be a bonus of 5,000, and if it's a pay grade 3, then here. So I need to close my parentheses around for my second statement. Now it should work fine. And it does. Alright, good. Let's go ahead and select our column and get rid of those extra decimal places because they just kind of annoy me. Alright. Now the nice thing about using a little system like this to create your cell referencing is because if I change the value of my pay grade 1 bonus to 2750, it'll automatically update everything in my table accordingly. Alright, moving along. We're going to create yet another, let's come back over here. Our next calculation that we're going to make is how much is our cost for our health insurance. So create a new column called health cost. And now here's where we're going to use our VLOOKUP. So insert our function. If you have VLOOKUP already listed in here, go ahead. If not, search for it by typing in the search box. Go find it, select it, and here we go. Alright, now if you remembered, we're going to look up a value. So what are we looking up? That's our first argument that we put in here. Okay? What are we looking up? In our case, we're going to look up the health plan, which is this column L. So we can say L2. You can either click it that way or just type L2. That's probably an easier way. So we want to know what's in L2. So the value that's in L2 is what we're looking up. Alright, where is our table? We have to know where our table is or know what the name of our table is. In this case, we know the name of it. It's called Health Plan Rates. You have to type it exact, otherwise it's not going to work. So the name of our table, and that's over there in our lookup tables. And then the next thing is, if you remember, so we're going to go look up the value, and then we want it to tell us something about it, right? And the information, if you, this particular table is a 2-column table, so we're going to look up the information that is in the first column, and then we're going to say we want it to return information from the second column. So we're going to put a 2 here. And in the range lookup box, we're going to type false. And the reason we type false is because we want it to be an exact match. And simply say OK. If we select our column, get rid of those pesky decimals. Alright, so we can scroll down through here and we can look. And how does that go? If you notice, we have a problem. If we scroll down, because we said it had to be an exact match, this guy here, he has some health plan called HMOG. Well, if we go to our lookup table and we look at our plans, here's our table, right? I don't see HMOG there. So when I said that it needed to be, by using the false in the range lookup, that required it to be an exact match. So when it's not an exact match, that's why we get this particular error that is in this box. And we'll fix that later and do a couple other things. But I just wanted to point that out to you. Alright. Now, one more thing. If you notice, this is the monthly health cost, but I want it to be an annual health cost. So the way we can do that is if we click on, it doesn't matter any of the formulas in this cell, or in this column, and we come up to our formula bar, we can modify our formula, and we're just going to say times 12. If you notice, everything in the entire column changed to multiply that for us. Alright, so we did a VLOOKUP to find an exact match. Now let's find a VLOOKUP to find an approximate match. And the reason that we would want to do that is if we go over here to lookup tables, we're going to be using this one here, the years of service table. It's called recognition is actually the name of the table. See, recognition. And if you look at this particular little table, you'll see that the years of service is 0, 1, 3, 5, 7. So if a person worked for 4 years, they wouldn't get an award, would they? If we were doing an exact match on our VLOOKUP. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to do what we call an approximate match, so that it looks in the years of service column, and it finds the approximate number or the number nearest to it, and then it will return the value that is in the second column of this item when we do this. Okay. So add a new column here called award, and we are going to calculate this now. Alright, again we're going to use our VLOOKUP, so insert function, VLOOKUP, and here. Alright, what are we looking up? Now the last time we just said L2, right? So we did, we can also use a structured reference for here too, and that's what I want you to use this time. So this time, I want you to use the structured reference for years service column, which is column M. So you remember, you just put the name of the column in the square brackets. Our table array, if you remember, our table was named recognition. So we can select that. And it's a 2-column table, so the information we want is in the second column. Now, the last time we used a VLOOKUP, we put false here. But we don't want that to happen. We want it to be an approximate thing, so we leave this blank. And we say OK. And here we go. We can change this, get rid of our decimals, and you'll see that it does exactly that. So here, this person here on line 3, they had 6 years of service. Remember that lookup table? It didn't have 6 though, right? So it pulls to the nearest number, which would be 5, and the corresponding value, which was $300. Alright, you remember we have that error over there in that health cost? We're going to tinker around with that now. Alright. Let's go back to our health cost functions and formulas. Just click on any cell there, doesn't matter which one. And you have our current function here. If I want to add the if error, it has to go in front of any other things that we're looking at. So the way that we do that is we can come up here on our formula bar and we can say in between the equals and the letter V and type if error and open our parentheses. Now we go to the end of our formula and we put a comma, and then what we're going to say here is invalid code. So what we're saying is, I want you to do all this VLOOKUP work, but if you can't find anything, then and there's an error, I want you to tell me that it's an invalid code. And we close our parentheses. Hit enter. Now it doesn't change anything, right? Because all of these looked okay. But scroll down to that one that was problematic before. Oh, look, here it is. Invalid code. So that gives us a spot check, and that was a lot better than having that other weird error issue that we did, right? So it gives you an opportunity to say, you know, danger, danger, Will Robinson, this doesn't exist, in a much nicer fashion without having to say, did I do something wrong? No, I didn't do something wrong, it's just that that particular health plan doesn't exist. So if I come over here and I change the health plan to HMOF, it fixes it and goes away. Alright, so that was a brief discussion about what? Nested ifs, doing a VLOOKUP with an exact match, doing a VLOOKUP with an approximate match, and adding the if error in there. Alright, gang, I want you to think about this, practice it, go through the video a couple different times if you need to. Do what you need to do to get this understood, and I'll see you on the next video.